It was a day like any other, or so it seemed. Humanity had been living in a fragile peace, unaware of the darkness that loomed just beyond their reach. The skies were clear, the sun shining brightly over Earth's great cities, but high above, in the vast reaches of space, things were about to change forever. Without warning, a fleet of ships, massive and far beyond anything Earth's technology had ever seen, appeared in Earth's orbit. The first sign of the invasion wasn't the ships themselves, but the eerie, silent presence they cast over the entire planet. At first, no one knew what to make of it. The world watched in disbelief as the sky was blotted out by these colossal vessels. Each ship was the size of a small moon, with alien markings etched across their metallic hulls. There was no communication, no warning, no attempt at diplomacy. The aliens didn't need to say anything to make their presence felt. They simply hovered, a looming shadow casting fear over every corner of the globe. The first broadcast came in the dead of night, transmitted across every communication channel known to humanity. The voice that spoke was cold, mechanical, and utterly devoid of emotion. It echoed across the world, sending a shiver down the spines of anyone who heard it. "People of Earth," the voice began, "you are an insignificant species. Your world is primitive, your technology outdated. We are the overlords of the stars, and your planet has been selected for assimilation. Your resources will be taken. Your civilization will be erased. Do not resist. Your fate is sealed." The message was brief, but it left no room for doubt. The invaders were not here to negotiate. They were not here to conquer for wealth or knowledge. They were here to destroy, to wipe Earth from existence. The idea of resistance was laughable to them. The ships, with their impenetrable shields and weapons that could obliterate entire cities in a single strike, seemed unstoppable. Panic spread like wildfire. Governments scrambled to respond, but their efforts were futile. There were no weapons capable of reaching the invaders' ships. Earth's military leaders, who had long anticipated alien threats, found themselves staring down the barrel of an existential crisis. The invaders had done their homework. They knew everything about Earth. They knew its weaknesses, its divided nations, its fragile alliances. It wasn't just the military that was outmatched. It was humanity itself. In the wake of the broadcast, cities around the world descended into chaos. Some tried to flee, others took shelter, but the invaders didn't move. They simply hovered, watching, waiting. For days, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the alien ships began their descent. In a matter of hours, massive pillars of fire and light rained down upon Earth's major cities: New York, London, Beijing. Each city was struck, buildings crumbling like sandcastles under a tide. The air filled with the sounds of explosions and the screams of millions as the aliens made their move. The world's leaders were in disarray. They had no idea how to fight back. Their nuclear arsenals, their cutting-edge aircraft, their weapons of mass destruction, all useless against the invaders. In the face of such overwhelming force, the people of Earth could only watch as the cities burned and their civilization began to fall apart. Yet, amidst the despair, something stirred deep within the hearts of Earth's people. They had been told they were weak, that they were nothing compared to the invaders. But the fire of defiance that had built human history was not so easily extinguished. The world was burning, but humans refused to bow. A quiet resistance began to take root. It wasn't just the military that fought back. It was the farmers, the doctors, the engineers, the civilians. People from all walks of life, united by one simple truth: they would not be erased. The first strike had been devastating, but humanity, though battered and broken, was not yet defeated. And as the alien forces surveyed their conquest, they had no idea what they had awakened. The world was reeling from the shock of the invasion. The suddenness of the attack left little time for preparation, and entire cities were reduced to rubble in mere hours. The aliens' power was unmatched, and the sense of helplessness that gripped Earth was palpable. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was an undeniable spark, something the invaders had completely overlooked. It was humanity's instinct to fight back, to survive. In the days that followed, world governments scrambled to mount a defense, but they were slow to react. Most nations had no idea how to combat an enemy with technology so far beyond their own. Earth's greatest military powers were left in disarray, as their weapons failed to make a dent in the alien forces. The invaders' shields absorbed everything, and their weapons tore through military bases with chilling precision. Yet there was something about humanity that couldn't be contained, something the invaders failed to understand. Earth's people did not give up. The defeat of the world's armies only pushed ordinary citizens to the forefront of the resistance. Military leaders, scientists, engineers, and even civilians, everyone knew that survival now rested on their shoulders. If they were to defeat this invader, it would take more than just brute force. It would require every ounce of human ingenuity. In hidden underground bunkers and makeshift war rooms, a plan began to take shape. Governments, once divided by borders and ideologies, set aside their differences and came together. The United Nations became a beacon of hope, coordinating efforts from every corner of the globe. But it wasn't just the military who rose to the occasion. Farmers in rural villages, factory workers in industrial zones, and even artists and teachers began contributing to the resistance in unexpected ways. It was the scientists who took the first major step. They worked tirelessly, often without sleep, in labs filled with makeshift equipment. Using the wreckage from destroyed alien ships and reverse-engineered technology, they began to craft new weapons, ones that might stand a chance against the invaders. They understood that traditional military might would be useless against an enemy with shields that could absorb anything thrown at them. Instead, they turned to unconventional tactics, studying alien energy sources, hacking their communication systems, and even learning to manipulate the alien tech for their own use. In the midst of chaos, the first breakthrough came. A group of engineers managed to replicate a form of electromagnetic pulse, EMP, that disrupted the aliens' ship systems. It wasn't enough to destroy their ships, but it was enough to ground them. The EMP sent ripples through the invaders' fleet, rendering their technology momentarily useless. In that instant, humanity struck. Cities that had been devastated in the first wave now became battlegrounds for humanity's newfound hope. Armed with makeshift weapons, guerrilla fighters took to the streets, disrupting the alien forces at every turn. It was guerrilla warfare at its finest, small teams of fighters attacking in waves, planting explosives on alien structures, hacking their communications, and sabotaging their vehicles. The invaders were not used to this kind of warfare. Their strategy had always relied on overwhelming force and technological superiority, not on human unpredictability. What the invaders didn't realize was that humanity's strength didn't lie in its weapons, but in its ability to adapt. Earth's people were improvising at every turn. Soldiers became hackers, civilians became strategists, and every victory, no matter how small, fueled their determination. As the days wore on, the resistance grew bolder, launching larger and more coordinated attacks. Despite their technological edge, the invaders found themselves struggling to contain the chaos. They had underestimated the human spirit. They had underestimated humanity's refusal to surrender. The longer the war raged, the more the aliens began to question their assumptions about Earth. They had thought it would be an easy conquest, a quick, efficient operation. But what they were seeing now was something far more dangerous. A species that, against all odds, was capable of resisting. The tide of the war had begun to shift, not because Earth had superior weapons, but because humanity's will to survive was stronger than anything the invaders could have anticipated. The invaders had long believed that Earth's struggle was a futile one. They were certain that once they displayed their overwhelming power, the humans would bow before them, cowering in submission. But with every passing day, the alien forces began to realize something unsettling. Humanity was not only surviving, but they were evolving. The first surprise came when a group of human engineers managed to reverse engineer one of the alien devices that had been left behind in the wake of the initial assault. The engineers worked around the clock in hidden labs, piecing together fragments of alien technology that had been salvaged from the wreckage. They studied the materials, the energy sources, and the way the alien machines functioned. The breakthrough came when they discovered a flaw in the alien energy shield, a gap in the frequency, a vulnerability that had been overlooked in the design. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The engineers crafted a crude, but effective, device that could disrupt the alien shields for a brief moment. It wasn't a weapon that could obliterate the invaders' ships or technology, but it was a game changer. For the first time, humans had the ability to cripple the invaders' defenses, if only for a short while. And in that short window, Earth's forces struck. The EMP devices, now hastily mass-produced in underground bunkers, were dropped onto the alien ships during a night raid. When the pulse went off, the alien ships lost power, their shields flickering and shutting down. The invaders had never anticipated a countermeasure like this. Their advanced technology was no longer invulnerable. For a few precious moments, the humans could attack freely. It was chaos. Fighter jets equipped with the new EMP weapons descended from the skies, launching devastating strikes against alien ground forces. The resistance fighters, emboldened by the success, launched a full-scale assault on the invaders' main landing zone. Tanks, once thought obsolete, roared back into action as guerrilla forces, now coordinated through hacked alien communications, tore through the streets. The invaders, caught off guard by the sudden shift in power, scrambled to regroup. Their arrogance had clouded their judgment, and they had underestimated humanity's resourcefulness. But it wasn't just the EMP that had surprised the invaders. It was the humans' ability to adapt. With every piece of alien technology they captured, they learned, improved, and made it their own. Within days, Earth's forces were using alien weapons against the invaders. They had turned the alien technology back on its creators, repurposing it with a savage efficiency. What had once been a deadly advantage for the aliens had now become their greatest weakness. The invaders, who had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, now faced a rapidly evolving enemy. Their fleets, once thought invincible, were being whittled away piece by piece. Their communications were jammed, their energy shields repeatedly disrupted, and their ground forces were being picked apart by guerrilla tactics that had rendered their superior numbers irrelevant. The invaders were forced to fight on humanity's terms, a game they were unfamiliar with and unprepared for. But even as the humans celebrated their unexpected victory, a sense of unease began to settle over them. The aliens had underestimated humanity's resourcefulness, but there was still a long road ahead. The invaders were not yet defeated. They would retaliate, and they would be furious. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity had hope. They had proven that the invaders were not invincible, and that despite the overwhelming odds, they could fight back. The war had only just begun, but humanity had found its first glimmer of victory. And that small spark would be enough to drive them forward. The unexpected success of the EMP strikes and the subsequent victories had stirred something in the alien forces that they had never anticipated. Uncertainty. What was supposed to be an easy conquest had become a nightmare. The humans, resilient and inventive, were no longer just fighting to survive. They were becoming a serious threat. But the invaders, for all their power, were still confident in their superiority. They believed the resistance would crumble under the weight of their next assault. They were wrong. In the shadows of the conflict, something else was happening, something the invaders had never expected. A faction of their own ranks, disillusioned with the invasion, had quietly begun to question their mission. They had watched humanity's resilience, its ingenuity, its ability to rise from the ashes, and they saw something in the humans that the rest of the coalition had ignored. What began as a quiet dissent soon became a full-blown rebellion within the invader ranks. These alien rebels had once believed in the superiority of their species, but they were now shaken by humanity's unyielding drive to survive. One night, under cover of darkness, the first message from the defectors reached Earth. The transmission was encrypted, but after several tense hours of decryption, humanity's military leaders were able to access it. It was a single, short message from a high-ranking alien officer who had defected with a group of rebels. "We were wrong. You are stronger than we ever imagined. Your species adapts too quickly for us to understand. The overlords are blinded by their arrogance. You are not the weak, primitive race they think you are. We can help you, but only if you act quickly." The message sent shockwaves through the human leadership. They had not expected this, and at first, they didn't know whether to trust it. The defectors had information, critical information that could give humanity the upper hand, but could they be trusted? Could the invaders who had shown such ruthless aggression really have a faction that was sympathetic to Earth's cause? After days of deliberation, the leaders of Earth's resistance decided to meet with the defectors. Using the information provided in the encrypted message, they arranged a clandestine meeting in an abandoned facility deep underground. The atmosphere was tense. Could these aliens, who had come to Earth with the intent to destroy, really have a change of heart? The defectors revealed shocking details. They explained how the invader coalition had underestimated humanity, believing Earth's technological limitations made it an easy target. But they had learned something important during their invasion. Humans had a unique ability to adapt, to think outside the box. The aliens had expected Earth's defenses to falter, but the humans had done the unexpected at every turn. They had proven themselves to be resourceful, quick to innovate, and able to survive even the most brutal of attacks. The rebels confessed that their leadership had never truly understood the human spirit, the drive to push forward, to endure, and to fight no matter the odds. The defectors spoke of how they had watched in awe as humans turned their failures into new strategies, their desperation into triumphs. They admitted that, if left unchecked, humanity might eventually grow strong enough to defeat them, and that was something the invaders had not counted on. The defectors offered their assistance, providing crucial insights into the invaders' weaknesses. They shared the location of the main alien command center and revealed critical information about the alien fleet's power sources, communication networks, and military strategies. With this knowledge, Earth's resistance could mount a far more coordinated and effective counteroffensive. But even as they shared this valuable information, the defectors warned that the overlords would not take kindly to their betrayal. The invaders would retaliate in ways that Earth could not yet fathom. The rebellion within their ranks was not yet large enough to topple the invader hierarchy, and the overlords would stop at nothing to crush this resistance, human or alien. The rebels gave humanity a choice: take the knowledge and fight on, or retreat into the shadows and accept the inevitable. But the defectors made it clear: humanity had a chance. It was slim, but it existed. The rest would be up to Earth's people. With the defectors' knowledge and their growing resolve, humanity was no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The war had taken an unexpected turn, and humanity was now in a position to strike back, not only with more powerful weapons, but with the knowledge of the enemy's own weaknesses. The tide had shifted once more, and the invaders' confidence was beginning to crack. What they had once considered an easy conquest was turning into a war they could not control. And now, with the help of alien defectors, humanity had a fighting chance. The information from the defectors had given humanity the edge they desperately needed. No longer would they be forced to rely solely on their improvisational tactics and brute force. With the knowledge of the invaders' weaknesses, humanity could now strike with precision, exploiting the flaws in their enemies' seemingly invincible technology. The war, once hopeless, was now a battleground for a new kind of resistance, one that was methodical, well-coordinated, and fiercely determined. The resistance forces began to implement their plans with military efficiency. The first phase of the counterattack targeted the alien command center, a massive facility hidden deep within the Earth's atmosphere. The defectors had provided vital coordinates, and Earth's forces were ready to act. Armed with alien tech that had been retrofitted to Earth's weapons, humanity launched a series of surgical strikes on key alien infrastructure. The battle was intense. Fighter jets and bombers, equipped with stolen alien weaponry, darted through the air, engaging in high-speed dogfights with alien ships. Each blast, each explosion, was a testament to humanity's ingenuity. The aliens, taken aback by the sudden resurgence of Earth's forces, scrambled to regroup. They had underestimated the speed at which humans could adapt and learn from their mistakes. At the heart of the offensive was a coordinated strike on the invaders' fleet. Using the defectors' information, Earth's resistance forces were able to breach the aliens' shield network with devastating accuracy. The EMP devices, which had once been a crude, experimental tool, had now been perfected and deployed in massive quantities. The alien ships, once impervious to human attacks, were now vulnerable. The EMP blasts were timed with perfect precision, disabling the invaders' shields and leaving them open to direct assault. As the skies filled with flashing lights and plumes of smoke, the ground forces, aided by alien technology and guerrilla tactics, pressed forward. Tanks, adapted with stolen alien tech, crushed alien defenses while resistance soldiers, armed with energy weapons, surged into the heart of the alien positions. The alien forces, used to overwhelming strength, now found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't easily defeat. Humanity was no longer fighting blindly. They were a well-oiled machine, using intelligence and strategic thinking to outmaneuver their once dominant foes. The greatest victory came when the command center was finally breached. For days, Earth's resistance forces fought tooth and nail to reach the heavily fortified facility. The final push was nothing short of brutal. Soldiers stormed the gates, engaging in fierce close-quarters combat with alien troops. The invaders, surprised by the intensity and determination of the humans, began to retreat, their morale shattered. It wasn't just the alien technology that had been turned against them. It was the indomitable human spirit, a force the invaders had never encountered before. The command center fell. The symbolic heart of the alien invasion had been crushed by the very species they had sought to destroy. The shockwaves of the victory rippled throughout the remaining invader forces. The invaders had underestimated humanity in every possible way. And now, they were paying the price. But even as humanity celebrated this hard-earned victory, the cost was clear. Earth had lost much. Cities were in ruins, millions of lives had been lost, and the planet's infrastructure was crippled. But despite the devastation, the message was clear. Humanity had proven that they could not be easily wiped out. They had fought back with everything they had, and they had won. The invaders, their morale shattered, and their leadership in disarray, began to regroup. They would not give up easily, and humanity knew the war was far from over. But for the first time in the conflict, the tide was no longer working in favor of the invaders. Earth had struck a decisive blow, and the invaders realized that they had underestimated humanity's capacity for defiance. It was a turning point in the war. The invaders would come again, but now they knew something they hadn't before. Humanity was no longer an easy target. And this time, they would be ready. The invasion had not gone as planned. What was meant to be a quick and decisive operation had become an all-out war. The invaders, once confident in their overwhelming technological superiority, had been blindsided by humanity's resourcefulness and resilience. The victory at the alien command center had been a devastating blow to their morale, but it was also a wake-up call. The overlords, who had been distant from the battle, watching from their distant strongholds, were finally forced to take direct control of the war. Deep within the heart of the invader fleet, in the sprawling command center on a distant planet, the leaders of the alien coalition gathered. The overlords were furious. They had underestimated humanity's ability to resist, and their defeat at the hands of the humans had shaken their sense of invincibility. For the first time in the war, they faced the very real possibility that their conquest of Earth might not succeed. It was a blow to their pride, their ego, and their centuries-long campaign to dominate the galaxy. We underestimated them, one of the overlords hissed, their voice dripping with venom. These creatures are more dangerous than we thought. Another overlord, larger and more imposing, nodded. Their ingenuity is beyond anything we've encountered. They adapted our technology faster than we could anticipate. We will need to escalate the conflict. They must be crushed before they can mount another offensive. It was clear that the overlords were not interested in negotiating. Earth's resistance had pushed them to the brink, and the overlords were determined to finish what they had started, no matter the cost. They had faced revolts in the past, but this was different. This was humanity, a species that had once been dismissed as primitive and weak, and they had come far too close to victory. With the command center at their disposal, the overlords activated the next phase of their strategy. They were no longer going to rely on subtlety or precision. Earth's survival was now a matter of total annihilation. The overlords launched a full-scale offensive, dispatching reinforcements and vast fleets of warships to Earth's orbit. These were not the sleek, stealthy ships they had sent initially. This time, they sent their heaviest, most destructive vessels, war machines capable of destroying entire continents in mere moments. The first wave of destruction was swift. The invaders unleashed a barrage of devastating firepower upon the Earth, focusing on the remaining pockets of human resistance. Cities that had been rebuilt after the earlier battles were once again reduced to ash. The overlords had no intention of taking prisoners. This was no longer a war for conquest. This was a war for annihilation. Earth's forces, still reeling from their recent victory, were now faced with an enemy that was even more powerful and ruthless than before. The alien warships hovered above the cities, unleashing devastating beams of energy that turned the streets into molten wastelands. It seemed like the invaders had learned from their mistakes. They no longer made the same miscalculations. This time, they came with overwhelming force, determined to break humanity's spirit once and for all. The resistance, however, had no intention of backing down. They had seen what humanity was capable of when pushed to the brink. The last few months had shown them that the humans were capable of incredible feats of resilience and adaptation. Earth's military leaders quickly rallied their forces, and though they had been battered, they were far from defeated. In response to the alien onslaught, the resistance leaders began to coordinate a global counteroffensive, using every weapon at their disposal. The defectors had provided them with invaluable intelligence on the aliens' fleet, and now humanity would use that knowledge to strike back with everything they had. The humans had suffered losses, but they had also learned from their mistakes. The battle was far from over, and Earth's people would not go quietly into the night. As the overlords watched their forces descend upon the planet, they failed to realize one critical thing. They had underestimated the heart of humanity. Earth's people had proven time and time again that they would never give up. The aliens had come expecting an easy conquest, but what they had found was a species capable of defying the odds, no matter how insurmountable they seemed. Now, the war would enter its most desperate phase. The overlords had declared their intent to annihilate humanity, but Earth had a final card to play. And this time, humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the very soul of their world. As the overlords unleashed their devastating offensive, the world trembled. Cities were obliterated, landscapes turned to wastelands, and humanity's resolve was tested like never before. It seemed as though the end was inevitable. The alien warships, massive and impenetrable, hung above Earth like an unstoppable storm, raining destruction down upon everything below. Humanity's cities, once symbols of life and culture, were reduced to crumbling ruins. The invaders had decided to show no mercy, and it felt as though Earth was on the brink of extinction. But even as the planet burned, something remarkable was happening beneath the surface. The people of Earth, once divided by borders, ideologies, and differences, had united in a way that no one had ever seen before. The resistance forces had grown stronger, more organized, and more determined. The damage inflicted by the alien assault only served to fuel their fury. They knew that if they didn't fight back now, humanity would cease to exist. In the midst of the chaos, humanity's most brilliant minds worked tirelessly in secret. The defectors had shared their knowledge, and now Earth's scientists, engineers, and military leaders combined their efforts to develop a final weapon, something that could potentially turn the tide of the war once and for all. The weapon was risky, experimental, and untested, but it was their last hope. A powerful energy surge, capable of disrupting the invaders' fleet from the inside, was designed to penetrate the very core of the alien warships. Using the knowledge of their technology, humanity had developed a weapon capable of disabling their entire fleet in one fell swoop. But there was a catch. This weapon would require an immense amount of energy, far beyond anything Earth had ever used. The humans had to act quickly before the invaders could bring down their final hammer blow. The world's last remaining military forces gathered, preparing for the ultimate assault. The plan was simple: strike directly at the heart of the invader fleet, with everything they had. The final weapon would be launched from a hidden military base in the mountains, and the resistance fighters would provide a distraction, drawing the invaders' attention and allowing the weapon to reach its target. It was a suicide mission for many, but they had no choice. The attack was set in motion. As the resistance launched their final, desperate offensive, humanity's leaders gave the order. Fighter jets, tanks, and guerrilla units surged forward, engaging in the most brutal and intense combat of the entire war. The invaders' warships, now aware of the full scope of Earth's resistance, began to retaliate with even more ferocity. Massive beams of energy tore through the air, and explosions rocked the ground as humanity's forces clashed head-on with the invaders' might. Amidst the chaos, the final weapon was deployed. It soared toward the alien fleet, its massive energy core glowing with raw power. It was a gamble, but humanity had no other choice. The fate of the planet rested on the shoulders of the brave soldiers who had volunteered for this mission, knowing full well that they might never return. As the weapon reached the alien fleet, everything seemed to slow down. The overlords, for the first time, were forced to recognize something they hadn't expected: the sheer willpower of the humans. They had fought tooth and nail to survive, and now they had one final chance to end the war. The weapon detonated with a blinding flash. A shockwave of pure energy rippled through the sky, and the alien ships began to falter. Their shields cracked, their systems overloaded, and their once imposing fleet began to disintegrate in a storm of flames and debris. The invaders had been defeated, not by overwhelming firepower, but by the very ingenuity, determination, and unity that they had never anticipated. As the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the invader fleet was no more. Humanity had struck the final blow. The aliens who had come to Earth with the intent to conquer and destroy were now in full retreat. Their arrogance had cost them everything. The invaders were not defeated by their superior technology, but by a species that refused to give up. In the aftermath, Earth's people mourned their losses. Millions had died, entire cities had been leveled, and their world would never be the same. But there was also a sense of triumph. Humanity had fought for its survival and won. They had proven that even in the face of insurmountable odds, they were capable of greatness. The aliens had learned, too late, that Earth was not a world to be taken lightly. Now, as Earth began to rebuild, humanity looked to the stars, knowing that they had earned their place among them. The universe would never forget the day humanity stood against the invaders and triumphed, against all odds. As the overlords unleashed their devastating offensive, the world trembled. Cities were obliterated, landscapes turned to wastelands, and humanity's resolve was tested like never before. It seemed as though the end was inevitable. The alien warships, massive and impenetrable, hung above Earth like an unstoppable storm, raining destruction down upon everything below. Humanity's cities, once symbols of life and culture, were reduced to crumbling ruins. The invaders had decided to show no mercy, and it felt as though Earth was on the brink of extinction. But even as the planet burned, something remarkable was happening beneath the surface. The people of Earth, once divided by borders, ideologies, and differences, had united in a way that no one had ever seen before. The resistance forces had grown stronger, more organized, and more determined. The damage inflicted by the alien assault only served to fuel their fury. They knew that if they didn't fight back now, humanity would cease to exist. In the midst of the chaos, humanity's most brilliant minds worked tirelessly in secret. The defectors had shared their knowledge, and now Earth's scientists, engineers, and military leaders combined their efforts to develop a final weapon, something that could potentially turn the tide of the war once and for all. The weapon was risky, experimental, and untested, but it was their last hope. A powerful energy surge, capable of disrupting the invaders' fleet from the inside, was designed to penetrate the very core of the alien warships. Using the knowledge of their technology, humanity had developed a weapon capable of disabling their entire fleet in one fell swoop. But there was a catch. This weapon would require an immense amount of energy, far beyond anything Earth had ever used. The humans had to act quickly before the invaders could bring down their final hammer blow. The world's last remaining military forces gathered, preparing for the ultimate assault. The plan was simple: strike directly at the heart of the invader fleet with everything they had. The final weapon would be launched from a hidden military base in the mountains, and the resistance fighters would provide a distraction, drawing the invaders' attention and allowing the weapon to reach its target. It was a suicide mission for many, but they had no choice. The attack was set in motion. As the resistance launched their final, desperate offensive, humanity's leaders gave the order. Fighter jets, tanks, and guerrilla units surged forward, engaging in the most brutal and intense combat of the entire war. The invaders' warships, now aware of the full scope of Earth's resistance, began to retaliate with even more ferocity. Massive beams of energy tore through the air, and explosions rocked the ground as humanity's forces clashed head-on with the invaders' might. Amidst the chaos, the final weapon was deployed. It soared toward the alien fleet, its massive energy core glowing with raw power. It was a gamble, but humanity had no other choice. The fate of the planet rested on the shoulders of the brave soldiers who had volunteered for this mission, knowing full well that they might never return. As the weapon reached the alien fleet, everything seemed to slow down. The overlords, for the first time, were forced to recognize something they hadn't expected: the sheer willpower of the humans. They had fought tooth and nail to survive, and now they had one final chance to end the war. The weapon detonated with a blinding flash. A shockwave of pure energy rippled through the sky, and the alien ships began to falter. Their shields cracked, their systems overloaded, and their once imposing fleet began to disintegrate in a storm of flames and debris. The invaders had been defeated, not by overwhelming firepower, but by the very ingenuity, determination, and unity that they had never anticipated. As the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the invader fleet was no more. Humanity had struck the final blow. The aliens who had come to Earth with the intent to conquer and destroy were now in full retreat. Their arrogance had cost them everything. The invaders were not defeated by their superior technology, but by a species that refused to give up. In the aftermath, Earth's people mourned their losses. Millions had died, entire cities had been leveled, and their world would never be the same. But there was also a sense of triumph. Humanity had fought for its survival and won. They had proven that even in the face of insurmountable odds, they were capable of greatness. The aliens had learned, too late, that Earth was not a world to be taken lightly. Now, as Earth began to rebuild, humanity looked to the stars, knowing that they had earned their place among them. The universe would never forget the day humanity stood against the invaders and triumphed. Against all odds, the skies above Earth were quiet once more. The massive alien fleet that had once hovered like a shadow over the planet was gone. shattered by humanity's resilience and ingenuity. The world, scared but unbroken, began the slow and painful process of rebuilding. Cities once reduced to rubble were being reconstructed, and communities that had lost everything began to rebuild what they could. The war had taken everything from Earth, but it had also given humanity something they had never truly understood before: unity. But amidst the victory, there was still a lingering question that haunted the minds of Earth's leaders. What would the invaders do now? The overlords had been crushed, their forces scattered, but the remaining alien factions still lingered in the shadows of the galaxy. Earth had shown the universe its power, but the message was not yet complete. As the planet recovered, the Earth's military leaders convened. With the invaders retreating into the unknown, humanity had one final task left: to ensure that Earth would never again be vulnerable to an alien threat. They knew that the overlords, though defeated, were not alone in the galaxy. There were other powers, other species who might one day look at Earth and see an opportunity to conquer. The planet had earned its place in the cosmos, but now it had to make sure it stayed there. In a move that stunned the galaxy, Earth's leaders sent a final message into space. It was a broadcast to all the stars, to any race that might be watching, listening, or planning. It was not a threat, but a declaration. Humanity had proven that they could fight and survive, but they had also proven that they would never back down. The message, transmitted across the farthest reaches of space, was simple yet profound. We are Earth. We are humanity. We stand united, and we will not fall. We will not surrender. We are no longer just survivors. We are conquerors of our own fate. If you wish to challenge us, know this: we will not bow to you. The time for underestimating us has ended. We will fight for our home, and we will win. The broadcast echoed across the stars, a message of defiance and strength that resonated far beyond Earth's borders. It wasn't just a warning. It was a proclamation that Earth was no longer a world to be taken lightly. The universe had witnessed humanity's triumph, and now they would never forget it. The broadcast wasn't just heard on Earth. It reached the far corners of the galaxy, touching the ears of countless alien species. Some laughed, dismissing the message as the final cries of a species that had barely survived. But others, those who had learned from the overlord's failure, took note. They knew that humanity was not like the other worlds they had conquered. There was something in Earth's people, a spark, a fire, that could not be extinguished. In the quiet after the message, Earth's people watched the stars. They knew that the universe was vast, filled with unknown dangers and challenges. But they also knew that humanity was ready. They had stood against the darkness, and they had emerged victorious. They would not let their world fall again. The last remnants of the alien fleet had retreated, but Earth was not naive. There would be more battles, more threats, and more trials ahead. But this time, humanity was prepared. They were no longer the weak, defenseless species they once were. They were warriors, survivors, and they had proven that they could overcome any challenge that came their way. And as Earth's people looked to the stars, they knew one thing for certain: the universe would never forget the day they stood against an invading force and declared, without hesitation, that Earth was theirs, and no one would take it from them.